Today's topic is a very important one and also difficult one, because what we read in the scripture talks about the dogma of Buddhism. It's a dogma. Just like in Christianity, there's a dogma, like there's a God who creates the whole world. And we cannot prove, or nobody can prove the existence of God by any philosophical or logical argument. That's a good thing that if they can prove, that would be awful and horrible to the whole Christianity. Nobody can prove it. There have been some great philosophers like Saint Anselm, Saint Thomas Aquinas, and like Paley. They tried to prove the existence of God by philosophical argument, but all these arguments, the great arguments, all failed to prove the existence of God. So even if God is watching over us now, what they have presented as the proof of the existence of God all failed, according to Immanuel Kant, the great German philosopher. And these days, the college introduction to philosophy, we always talk about those proofs. Proofs. We are not saying there is no God. All we are doing is in philosophy. Even if God exists and He may be watching over us, all these arguments so far presented fail to prove the existence of God. So there's a dogma. And if you reject the dogma, then the whole Christian faith will fail. In Buddhism, we have a dogma too. And of course, there are all kinds of stories, lores, and legends, and so on, which tried to prove the theory of reincarnation, and especially cause-effect, called the karma cause-effect. So if you remove the dogma of karma and reincarnation, then Buddhism falters. Buddhism, collapses. So the heart of the whole Buddhist teaching dogma is the theory that there's a law of karma, and there's a cycle of birth and death according to what one does. And since we have no way of proving scientifically what they thought, we take that as a Buddhist dogma, just as in Christianity, that the faith in God is a faith in the dogma. Any religion has that. Okay? So that's why I said the topic which we are going to talk about is an important one, because it's a dogma. If you reject it, you reject the Buddhism. And also it's difficult. Why? We have no scientific proof so far to prove that there is really six paths or six realms of existence of the devas and heavenly beings and human beings, asuras, animal world, hungry ghosts, and hellish beings. We can understand there are six realms of existence, but we cannot prove scientifically that if I die, I'll choose one of the six paths, depending what I do. So, and if you remove this one from Buddhism, there's not much to learn from Buddhism, and not much we can benefit ourselves from the Buddhist teaching, so we have to accept it. And accepting it is better than not accepting it. Why? Even though we can prove there's a life after death and also the cycle of birth and death, Buddha himself said, many stories of his own previous lives. And if you go to the library, you can find two big, two-volume stories of his previous life called the Jataka stories. All kinds of interesting stories for 500 lives. Okay, the Buddha became the Buddha after 500 rebirths. He didn't give up to reach the Buddhahood, and eventually, 2,500 years ago, Shakyamuni Buddha attained the Buddhahood. And even now, we respect and close to 500 million people all over the world have faith in Buddha's teaching. You know? 500. Maybe not quite 500, 300 100 million. But a lot of people. But you know that there are 2.1 billion Christians and 1 billion Muslims out of 6 billion human beings. And you know, I said that if you're a Buddhist, you have to accept this. There's the Buddha taught that human beings and all living beings go through the cycle of birth and rebirth, and which birth you are going to get after this one, whether you will be born as a human being or as a snake or a dog or a cow. It all depends what you do in this life. And we read in the scripture that the question was whether if you practice well following the teaching of the Buddha, then you can mitigate or get rid of the evil karma. And Grandmaster Sotasan said, no, you cannot get rid of it, but you can mitigate it. Mitigating, making it less and less like that. There's a story in China, the Tang Dynasty, Pai Chung. Pai Chung is the abbot of a Buddhist monastery. Oh, he had a mayor of the monks who were practicing under his tutelage, teaching. And sometime when he was giving Dharma talk, like I am giving a Dharma talk here, and there are hundreds of those monks, sometimes from far away, to listen to this Pai Chung's sermon, or okay, we can say it's a Dharma talk, all right. Sermon is not good. Dharma talk. You know, I don't want to call what I'm doing is a preaching. I'm only talking about the Dharma because I have no right to give a sermon to you. And I hope that you make some advantage of that. To give a sermon, you must be flawless, perfectly enlightened, flawless master. And I am full of defects. So if I try to give a sermon, then my conscience stares at me, you have no right to give a sermon. You can best just give a Dharma talk, explain them. Giving a Dharma talk is like providing food in a bowl, and the bowl should be very clean, very clean. If the bowl is dirty, it's a sin and a crime.